Hello, my name is Tucker Jackson, and this is Mark Gray from the Benton Church of Christ. What made you decide to become a preacher?
Well, it was something I really enjoyed doing. I had started in college working to be a doctor, as a matter of fact. And as I was working through that, my father got sick, and I ended up coming home. And as I was there, I was working with the church, mainly working with teenagers. And the more I did it, the more I enjoyed it, the more it appealed to me, and the more I realized this is something I really enjoyed doing. And so I went into that direction.
What school or college did you attend?
Well, I went to a community college during the summers when I was in high school, and went to Texas Tech for a short while. That's when I came home. And then I ended up going to a place in Tennessee called Freed-Hardeman University. And the reason I chose there was I decided I wanted to be a preacher. I asked 10 of my favorite preachers where to go, and 8 of them said there, and so that's where I went. And so I went to Freed-Hardeman, got a couple degrees from there, got a master's degree from there. After that, went to Harding Graduate School for a while. That's a school that's in Memphis. And then I did some postgraduate work, doctoral work at a place called Faulkner, which is in Alabama.
You were talking about Freed University earlier. Could you add some more onto that?
Sure. Freed-Hardeman University is an interesting place, especially if you come from a larger university. Texas Tech has has an enrollment of maybe about 60,000, 70,000. Freed-Hardeman at the time when I went had 1,800. So it's a totally different world. It's in a small town, and so it's almost hard to get in trouble. But the thing is, you get to know everybody really well. And it's that interaction that you have constantly with everybody. It was an experience I enjoyed, and it was a good idea. It's a good place to go.
What led you to the church you lead today?
Oh, all sorts of things. When I graduated, I moved down to Mississippi, lived in Tupelo for about 5 years, lived in Jackson, which is the capital of Mississippi, for a little bit over 10 years. I had known about Benton. When I was at Freed-Hardeman, I had spoken at Benton one Sunday, which nobody here remembers because I was just a little kid. But the congregation here was really wanting a guy that was on my team. His name was Chris Dempsey. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him, but I think so. And so Chris would preach, and I would lead singing, and I would teach Bible class. And I had a good talk afterwards with a fellow named Hatler Morgan. And so I always knew about the congregation. And down in Mississippi, I decided when I was there, I wanted to raise my kids in a place much like Marshall County. This is a good place to raise your kids. And so that's what helped me make the decision to move up here.
So what was the previous preacher like? Have you met him at all, or just...
Previous preacher to Benton?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Jay Lockhart was the main one. I know Gene Gilliland. He was a preacher here for about 16 years, and he lives across the street now from my mother. Very good guy, very devout and very sincere fella. And then I knew Jay. Jay and I know each other, and I've always respected Jay and the scholarship and the smoothness. He's much more of a smooth person than I am. And I've always respected him and that work of which he did. So, yeah.
So what was your first lesson like? How did you feel in that moment when you were up on stage?
My very first lesson?
Yeah.
It was on the book of Hebrews. We focused on Hebrews 11, verses 1 through 6. And I remember it was enjoyable. It was funny because back at that time, Benton didn't have as many people as she does now, the congregation.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, what's this big auditorium and not a lot of people here? You know, it's kind of interesting. And but the people were nice, and I love the accent here. Kentucky is not far south, but the background of the people who live here, coming through the valley and also coming from the north after the Revolutionary War, there's a specific, in the Jackson Purchase area, specific accent that's here that's not anywhere else in the country.
So how nervous were you on your first one? Because I remember doing my first, and I couldn't stop shaking my legs.
Right. Well, you know, by the time I came to Benton, I had been preaching for, I guess, 15 or 16 years. So I was a little bit used to it. Now, I remember when I was 16, the very first time that they made all the teenagers preach a sermon, I was scared to death. I had like 25 pages of notes, handwritten. This is back before computers and all that business. And it was on Philippians 2. And I had 25 pages of notes, and my lesson lasted, I think, about 5 minutes. But it felt like an hour because there were just so many people there watching and everything. And I was scared to death. And it was just, oh man, I just kept thinking, Lord, if you just let me down, you know, I will be a missionary to some weird place. I will, you know, never eat meat. I don't know what all promises I made, but man, I wanted to make a bunch of them.
Now, how used to get to the stares of people like in the entire auditorium? Because like with having so many people look at you, at what point did you get comfortable with that?
Well, there's a secret. If I'm not wearing my glasses, I can't see. I have astigmatism, and so I can see not much more than shapes once you get about 30 feet away. Now, what's funny is when I preach, a lot of times I'm kind of in my own world, and so I really don't notice everybody. But it is so much fun to watch this person snoring, this person on their phone, and every once in a while they'll finally get to a good beam and they'll smile real big. And watching, you know, this person, you know, this mother working with her baby. There's so many stories happening while you're preaching, and it's just an interesting interaction which goes on. You know, sometimes if you clap or if you stomp or if you say something real hard, everybody will stop and look at you, and you've got them for about 2 seconds. The key word, this sounds funny, if you're ever public speaking and you notice nobody's paying attention to you, just say Disney. And everybody looks up and you got them. Not long, but you got them for a second.
So how many hours does it usually take to make a lesson?
This changes depending on what's going on through the week and everything. Generally, like the Sermon Sunday, I started before the year began and planned out my preaching for the entire year. And that takes maybe a solid week.
Definitely a lot of effort.
Well, yeah. And so I know the title, I know the scripture. It doesn't have to be that, but it gives me time so that week I'm not going, what am I going to preach about? But it gives me a chance. And then, of course, a sermon usually lasts about 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes. And there's probably about 6 or 7 hours involved in each one, if it's done well. Now, there's some times when you're doing weddings, funerals, counseling, when you're doing visits, when things are going on at the building that you need to be involved in, that you've got to fake it. But if you have enough background, you can fake it for a little while as long as you don't do it too much.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, right.
So, has there ever been a case where someone would ask you a question that you did not have the answer to?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it happens all the time. And the smartest, absolute best thing you can say is, I don't know. We were talking the other day, we had a Wednesday night class on the book of Esther, and we were talking about how the Persian kingdom, you know, Esther was a queen, had 127 provinces, and it went from Ethiopia all the way to India. So a fellow stopped me after class, and he wanted to know about the Apostle Thomas and the planting of Christianity in the first century. According to church history, Thomas went to India. And he wanted to know how the early church dealt with the Mongol hordes. And after the early church survived the Mongol hordes that came into the northern part of India, how the church dealt with the British Empire as it colonized, you know, the area of India. And I don't know. I don't know it. I didn't even know all that stuff had happened. And so you just kind of nod. And a lot of times people answer their own questions, because questions like that, sometimes they're just wanting to be able to tell you stuff. And so, but people ask you stuff all the time that you have no idea about. But that's what's beautiful about Christianity and about life, you know. If you knew everything, I mean, what would you do?
So do you have a favorite lesson, or are they all just kind of the same to you? Do you have no favorites?
Oh, well, Every one of my sermons is like my baby, you know. And you're not supposed to have favorite children. You know, my kids will argue about that because they all accuse each other of being the favorites. But there's sometimes when you'll do a lesson and it's just your favorite one to do. You know, for me, Ephesians 2, talking about grace and grace working through faith, I love that passage. 2 Corinthians 5, I love that passage. And there's some that are not as fun maybe, but still necessary. But there are some that you enjoy more, but you have to love them all.
So we all have our embarrassing moments.
Oh, no.
So is there a worst lesson, not specifically the subject, but just something that happened during it that made it like possibly your worst?
Oh boy. Well, I was, one time I was preaching in Honduras. It was Tegucigalpa, it was the capital, and we had gone to La Ceiba, which is up on the coast, in Trujillo. And, you know, it was hot as all get out. And I was just preaching along, had a interpreter beside me. He was speaking Spanish, interpreting. And they have outdoor services. You know, it was a cinder block house. But with the outdoor services, sometimes a dog would walk through, sometimes a lizard would come through. That's interesting. One time, just this flock of goats start walking in. And you know, you just keep preaching because everybody's used to it. With this goat, I guess decided that it liked me. And it started chewing on my rear end, like on my pants, and trying to pull my pants down. And you know, I'm trying to act preacherly and trying to pull my pants up and trying to hope that he wasn't going to rip a hole out of my pants. And so I'm trying to kick him. And people are laughing about it. That was an embarrassing episode. That was a rough one. I've had 3 people have heart attacks when I'm preaching. And that's always, you know, strange. You know, how do you deal with that? Do you stop or do you keep going and let the medical personnel work? I had a guy pull a gun one time in church. That wasn't great. That was when I lived down in Jackson. I've passed out twice while I was preaching. That was pretty embarrassing. So yeah, there's all sorts of times that you just think, whew, good grief.
I know you've made a bunch of books. Do you have a favorite one also?
That I've written?
That you've written, yes.
Well, I have a book. I self-publish. It's a book, a review of the New Testament. I have one on Christian manliness. It's 1st and 2nd Peter, talking about how a father would want to tell his children. I have one on marriage. That's probably my favorite one because I get to put a lot of my jokes in that book. And so maybe that one's my favorite, I think.
So I know you tell a lot of jokes in your lesson. So I just have to ask, is there a line that you like don't exactly cross? Is there like an in-between in terms of telling jokes to make sure people interested and just telling the lesson overall? Yeah,
well, especially in church, you have to, there's a line to cross. And I'm not just talking about, you know, no dirty jokes. Of course, you wouldn't do a dirty joke, whether it's in church or not. When you do a joke in church, you always have to be sure it's not pointed at somebody, you know, because there's always somebody that could be offended. In fact, you're not just worried about the people in the building. You're worried about people who watch you on the internet, whether it's live
because you like live stream all these.
And so the best jokes, the safest jokes are the ones that turn on you. You know, I got up today and, you know, this happened or whatever, you know.
Woke up and fall off the bed, that type of stuff.
But you can't do it too much because then people just begin to, that's people's mindset of you is just this bumbling person all the time. And so you kind of have to watch how you do it. Now, sadly for me, a lot of times my jokes write themselves. You know, I'll go through and I don't mean to say something funny, but I stutter and it's just like, what in the world just happened?
You just stutter and people laugh and you have no idea why.
Yes, what did I just do? Yes, very much so.
So do you have a favorite trip that you've gone on?
You mean like as a preaching trip?
Yeah, like as a preaching trip, missionary, you know, that type of stuff.
Oh, man. Well, I've been to the Caribbean, different islands in the Caribbean. I think I went 12 years in a row at one time. I spent some time in Mexico, and that was fun. I have a picture of me, a lot more hair, a lot less fat, but it was in Matamoros, Mexico, and I'm under the bank sign, and the thermometer says 146 degrees. Now, I don't think it was 146, but it was in the 120s. And then spent some time in Russia, north of the Arctic Circle. And once you go north of the Arctic Circle, the sun does different things. And so the daytime there at that time was 16 hours a day. So it'd come up about 3 in the morning and go down about 10 at night. And, you know, it's just unreal to think how people live like that above the Arctic Circle.
Yeah. So what was your favorite event that you've held at church? I think I already know what it is, but I just
Well, what would you say?
The Manly Men Party.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Mind explaining that to the audience?
Oh, we have a Manly Men Party. Many times church in America is somewhat feminized in a sense. You know, you have the showers and you have your teas and you have, you know, just almost everything. And thankfully, you know, the women take care of us so much. And so every year at Christmas, we have a Manly Men Party. And it's got some rules. We're going to, we meet in a bus barn. Don't need a building, don't need air conditioning or heating. We meet in a bus barn unless it snowed 10 inches. And if it snows 10 inches, then we're going to meet outside.
Has it ever snowed 10 inches?
No, thankfully no. You are allowed to, you have to wear Carhartt or camo to come. But if you need to wear stretchy pants, elastic waistbands, we understand, right? This is a Manly Men Party, and so everybody has to bring a dish, no vegetables allowed. And if you shot it, whatever you're bringing, if you shot it, you get to go first in line. And we all bring a tool to share into ooh and all over. And then we exchange those gifts.
Gotcha.
So, oh yeah, it's a fun time.
So I'm going to go back to the favorite trip part.
Okay.
What was your favorite part about these trips besides the lesson part? Because I know like that's kind of the main part of it all.
It is so neat. I had quite a bit of college education and a lot of those little letters behind your name. And so I got to speak in a lot of schools and things such as that when I was in Russia. And it is fascinating when you go to the other side of the world. First of all, you know, they love their country. But, you know, this is Russia, Germany, Mexico, different places. They love their country, but when you boil it down, they are the exact same as we are. And of course, that would make sense. You know, we're all people, but it's just so neat to get over and see these people who speak a different language, eat different foods, but they're just the same as we are. So it's just fascinating, I think.
So this is my final question. This is probably going to take the rest of the runtime.
Oh, man.
But I heard you're making a new school. Mind telling us more about it?
Well, I'm not making it. This is, a lot of people are working together. It's called Titus Christian. And it's going to be over on the far side of Benton towards Murray. And it's a task. A lot of people have thought about it for a long time. And it's just, I guess, kind of an opportunity to build a place for those who maybe don't fit in public education, maybe not as well. But it's to be a place where people are loved, people are taken care of, where, you know, people matter. And I mean, they do matter in public education. You have a lot of teachers who do a lot of work and really love their work. But I really appreciate the work that Haley and some of these other people, many other people, are putting into it, because it's a major, major deal. Now, when I lived down in Mississippi, I worked with a Christian college called Magnolia Bible College. For a short time, I was the president, but for many years, I worked as a teacher. And it was fascinating how much work goes into a school.
Yeah.
Especially when it's not government funded and you don't have the government mandates and the government telling you what to do. We always think, well, I wish I had my own school and I'd have my own rules. And then once you have it, you're like, oh my goodness, what are the rules?
Yeah.
So it's amazing to see the good work.
So I just want to thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And well, we'll see you next time, maybe.
All right,
Who knows?
appreciate it, man. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.